something in the store. A place. I've I found a place.
This is the man only known as Clark. In the movie Backrooms, he is a man whose personal failures, emotional instability, and desperate search for meaning make him uniquely vulnerable to the impossible world hidden beneath his furniture store. Clark's journey is not merely one of survival against monsters or escape from an endless labyrinth. It is the story of a man whose unresolved trauma and inability to confront his own flaws slowly merge with the strange reality of the backrooms until the two become inseparable. His story explores what happens when addiction, depression, denial, identity, memory, and self-destruction ultimately end in one of the most tragic and symbolic deaths that the backrooms has ever seen. When we first meet Clark, his life has already collapsed long before he discovers the backrooms. Once an aspiring architect with genuine ambitions, he now owns a furniture store that appears to be failing financially. The store itself reflects his emotional state. Once intended to provide stability and success, it has become a monument to disappointment. The large sale advertised throughout the building with the slogan, "Everything must go," functions not only as a marketing campaign, but also as a metaphor for Clark's life, suggesting that everything he once valued, his marriage, career aspirations, home, and sense of identity, is slipping away. Clark's marriage has also disintegrated. Throughout therapy sessions, we learn that Clark spent years supporting his wife financially while she attended law school. Although he initially viewed this as an act of love, those sacrifices slowly transformed into resentment, and Clark buried his frustrations beneath alcohol and emotional withdrawal.
Who do you think pays for everything while you're gallivanting around campus like a 30-year-old freshman? I'll give you a hint. It's me.
Nothing's ever your fault, is it? You get kicked out of the house? Blame your wife.
He's at the end of his rope, but I think he's got more rope to climb. I think he's kind of climbing in a circle, more so. I think he kind of fell into the bottom of a fishbowl and he's not really quite getting out. He very much lives in the past. He points to all these events that could have gone differently for him, all of these, times and places that he believes that he gave what he needed to, and it was others or other circumstances that let him down in some way. And so I think he's very much living in sort of a state in which he's not quite understanding that he's, there's freedom to move outside of where he is right now. I think he's feeling quite stuck. I think he's in a very stuck position in life. And
eventually, a drunken argument resulted in his wife forcing him to leave their home. Homeless and emotionally isolated, Clark began sleeping inside his own furniture store. From the start of the movie, we see Clark as someone struggling with profound psychological distress. While the movie avoids assigning him a specific diagnosis, his behavior suggests several overlapping mental health problems. His dependence on alcohol indicates substance use disorder, functioning as an unhealthy coping mechanism for overwhelming emotional pain. He also displays numerous symptoms associated with major depressive disorder, including hopelessness, diminished self-worth, emotional numbness, withdrawal from meaningful relationships, and an inability to envision a better future. His identity has become almost entirely defined by failure. He no longer sees himself as an architect, husband, or successful businessman. Instead, he increasingly defines himself by what he has lost.
They can't feel anything. There's no thoughts, no pain, no ego. Can you imagine how good that must feel?
His therapy sessions reveal his resistance to accountability. Clark is repeatedly encouraged to examine his own behavior rather than blaming circumstances or other people. This is shown when the argument that ended his marriage is reenacted in the therapy session. Instead of expressing empathy for his wife's feelings, Clark quickly redirects the conversation toward his own sacrifices. He focuses on paying her tuition, abandoning his dreams, and feeling underappreciated. While these frustrations are understandable, Clark remains unable to acknowledge that resentment, alcoholism, and emotional volatility also contributed significantly to the collapse of their relationship. Rather than confronting painful truths about himself, he consistently locates the source of his suffering outside himself. His business failed because life was unfair. His marriage ended because his wife failed to appreciate him. Therapy feels pointless because, as Clark insists, he is simply wired that way.
I hurt people. I don't want to, it's just the way I'm wired, so maybe I deserve to be alone. You say it is my fault.
Yes, but it's just the way you're wired, isn't it? Isn't it?
It's okay. It's just the way we're wired.
By convincing himself that he cannot change, Clark protects himself from confronting guilt, but he also eliminates any possibility of growth. This will eventually become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it starts when Clark discovers the hidden opening in the basement of his furniture store. Beyond the impossible doorway lies the backrooms, an extra-dimensional labyrinth of endless yellow hallways, fluorescent lights, malformed furniture, impossible architecture, and distorted copies of reality. Unlike the ordinary world that constantly reminds Clark of failure, the backrooms awaken something inside him that had long been dormant. As a failed architect, he immediately becomes fascinated by impossible spatial design. Here exists a structure that ignores every law of architecture while simultaneously appearing strangely familiar. His curiosity quickly transforms into obsession. Night after night, Clark returns, mapping corridors and attempting to understand the impossible environment.
You see, it's like a maze. It just goes on and on and on. Sometimes I'm scared I'll get lost. That's the door. I taped an outline on the other side, too, just to help us find our way back.
For the first time in years, he possesses purpose, and this purpose is also what begins to destroy him. Clark allows the backrooms to replace every remaining aspect of his identity. What deteriorates is not necessarily his grasp on reality, but his judgment, priorities, and emotional stability. The backrooms become his escape from a life that constantly reminds him of failure. The relationship between Clark's psychology and the backrooms becomes even more apparent once he begins describing how the dimension functions. According to Clark, the backrooms do not create perfect copies of reality. Instead, they misremember people, places, and objects. Human beings appear as distorted still-life figures whose features become increasingly malformed over time. Familiar rooms exist but contain incorrect proportions, misplaced furniture, or architectural impossibilities. The backrooms resemble memory itself, imperfect, fragmented, and constantly reconstructing reality from incomplete information.
This place builds them. Or actually, more like it remembers them. You know, all these places and rooms and buildings misremembering themselves.
This concept mirrors Clark's own mental state. Throughout the movie, his memories of his wife become increasingly one-sided. He remembers supporting her education but struggles to remember how his drinking affected their marriage. He recalls feeling unappreciated while minimizing the pain he caused others. Just as the backrooms imperfectly reconstruct the physical world, Clark imperfectly reconstructs his emotional past. Both create distorted versions of reality shaped by memory rather than truth. By the time his therapist enters the backroom searching for him, Clark has undergone a transformation. He has adapted to living inside an impossible environment populated by monstrous imitations of humanity. His conversations are detached from reality. He casually explains the behavior of the still-life creatures, describing them almost like a naturalist documenting wildlife. Clark preserves the severed head of his employee in a refrigerator, symbolizing the collapse of his morals.
I tried this exercise with her before. It doesn't go anywhere. You can eat them. Oh. This is my assistant manager. I tried to help her, but she just...
Yet fragments of the man he once was still survive. When his therapist challenges him, Clark listens more openly than ever before. He even admits that her earlier reenactment with his wife had been accurate. This moment is crucial because it represents the first time Clark genuinely accepts responsibility instead of defending himself. After spending nearly the entire movie insisting that he could never change, he finally begins doing exactly that. But that is not what happens.
For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. I don't think I want to change.
Clark does not want to change. He does not want to grow or become better. He is perfectly happy with himself and living in the fractured memories of the backrooms, and he is ultimately consumed by his demons.
Are you interested in forging a new path and see where that leads?
Sure. Why not? I'm here. She says we don't need to change.
Captain Clark, a towering, monstrous version of himself dressed as the mascot from his furniture commercials, appears before him. On one level, the creature is another dangerous entity created by the backrooms. On another, it functions as Clark's ultimate psychological double. It represents every aspect of himself he refused to confront. His rage, his pride, his commercial persona, his obsession, and the identity he created to hide his insecurities. Clark attempts to communicate peacefully with the creature, almost as though he believes he can finally reconcile with the darker aspects of himself. Instead, Captain Clark attacks. It bites deeply into Clark's shoulder, throws him violently against the walls, and ultimately devours him. The scene is horrifying not only because of its brutality, but because of its symbolism. Clark is literally consumed by a monstrous reflection of his own identity. Clark spends the entire movie searching for meaning inside an impossible labyrinth when the answers he needed had always existed within himself. What destroys Clark is his inability to separate discovery from obsession and curiosity from escapism. The backrooms become attractive because they allow him to avoid confronting his failures in the real world. Clark ultimately becomes another fragment within the endless architecture he loved so deeply. The backrooms consume him physically, emotionally, and symbolically until there is almost nothing left of the man who first stepped through the hidden doorway. His death is therefore not simply the ending of a character's story, but the completion of the movie's central metaphor. The greatest horror of the backrooms is not merely that they are infinite or filled with monsters. Their true horror lies in their ability to reflect the deepest fears, regrets, memories, and identities of those who enter them.